Your time management is not only impacted by your thoughts, it's impacted by the structural realities also. But if we want to change the world, we're going to have to believe that our ideas are worthwhile. We're allowed to try and fail and make mistakes and try again. All those things are necessary for actually changing some of those structural problems too.
I'm Amy Porterfield, ex-corporate girl turned CEO of a multi-seven-figure business. But it wasn't all that long ago that I lacked the confidence, the budget, and the time to focus on growing my small but mighty business. Fast forward past many failed attempts and lessons learned, and you'll see the business I have today. One that changes lives and gives me more freedom than I ever thought possible. One that used to only exist as a daydream. I created the Online Marketing Made Easy podcast to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to help you do the same. If you're an ambitious entrepreneur or one in the making who's looking to create a business that makes an impact and a life you love, you're in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Well, hey there, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of Online Marketing Made Easy. Sometimes I interview my guest and then record the intro because I kind of want to know the vibe and really get a good sense of where we go with this conversation. And I'm just going to tell you right now that this conversation with my guest today triggered me, and I did not expect that. You'll hear me in the episode saying, I feel triggered right now. She literally caught me in a thought that she's like, you see that right there? Like, whoa, this is a really unique episode. I needed it. And my hope is that at the end of the episode, you're going to think, whoa, I needed that too. That's my guess at the end of this episode. So today, this episode is definitely geared toward my female listeners, but no matter how you identify, I think you're going to walk away with a lot of value from this episode. My guest today has so graciously hosted me on her podcast. Her podcast is called Unf Your Brain, but she has yet to make an appearance here with me until today. Her name is Kara Loewentheil, and she is a former lawyer and a graduate of Yale College and Harvard Law School. I don't think you could get any better than that. However, she is now a master certified life coach. You'll hear her in the interviews say, how do you go from a lawyer to a life coach? Let me tell you how. So she's got a really unique story. Kara is the founder of the School of New Feminist Thought, where she teaches women to find the confidence to pursue their dreams by unlearning the socially programmed anxiety that our society has instilled in us. Along with cognitive change strategies they can use to rewire their brains and create new beliefs that will lead them to the life they desire. All of her work, in my opinion, she's not necessarily saying this, I'm saying this from my experience with Kara, I feel like all of her work leads to you living the life that you desire. Her strategies work. I've been her friend for a while, and I've experienced the power of what she teaches, and I'm excited for you to experience it today as well. Kara is also a published author. At the time of this episode, her brand new book just hit the shelves. It's called Take Back Your Brain, and we're going to talk about it on the podcast today. I believe that everybody needs to read this book. It is very powerful. In today's episode, we're talking about the deep-rooted anxiety and stress that leads to your self-doubt, self-criticism, and low confidence. Specifically, where it comes from, how it surfaces in your day-to-day, and more importantly, how to free yourself from it so you can take control of your life, your business, and those big, bold dreams that you're going after. There's no better time to start showing up for yourself in a stronger, consistent, more confident way, both in your professional and your personal life. In my book, 2 Weeks Notice, there's this theme that runs throughout, and the theme is bet on yourself. And I feel like this interview today is going to encourage you to do that. And so I just feel like the message is so important. If you've been feeling low, unworthy, and just really saying not so nice things to yourself about yourself, pay close attention. When Kara talks about rewiring your brain and also talking to yourself differently, to me, that was the most powerful part of the interview, how to talk to yourself differently. It really changes things. But there's a lot in this interview I don't want you to miss, so I won't make you wait any longer. Let's dive in, and I can't wait for you to meet my guest, Kara. Kara, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so excited to be here. I always love chatting with you.
And I've been looking forward to this. And I just want to start out right from the beginning. It's like a basic but not so basic question. And that is, what does it actually mean to be a feminist?
Oh, it's a good question. We're starting out with I was on a podcast earlier today and I started talking about feminism. And they're like, oh, you're touching the third rail. And I was like, I live on the third rail. It's fine. I'm just electric. So I think it's a really important question because one of the things that I kind of lay out in my book, Take Back Your Brain, which is out today, is the difference between feminism as a political philosophy and feminism as a political movement. So not everybody agrees with everything that the American, feminist movement as a political movement has done. And also any political movement has like a real range of people in it, right? Just looking at like any political party, you've got people who believe lots of different things. So people think when you say you're a feminist, that means they have this sort of caricature of like the most extreme, wing of that social movement. But most people in any social or political group are not on the most extreme fringe. When I'm talking about feminism, I'm really talking about feminism as a philosophy, which is just the idea that no one gender should have more rights or opportunities or kind of unearned social, economic, political benefits than any other gender. And, I think the way we talk about it, people think you could be like a feminist or a sexist or like this neutral thing that they would like to think of themselves as. And one of the things I say in the book is like, there isn't really a neutral. It's like either you believe that one gender, any gender, should have more rights and opportunities than others, or you don't, or you believe we should all have the same rights and opportunities. If you believe that, you are actually a feminist. You maybe just didn't know it. And that doesn't mean that you have to have any exact set of beliefs or join any exact faction of the movement. But that's how I define it for the purpose of the kind of mindset work that I do.
Okay, that was very good. Like, yes, I think a lot of the people listening, they can 100% get on board and it makes sense. And I just wanted to kind of set the groundwork because we're going to get into things here. So here's the first thing I want to get into. One thing I love about you, like absolutely love, is you are unapologetic about how you message your mission. And you help women, or tell me if this is right, you help women deconstruct their minds around where society has said they fit in. Is that true?
Yeah, there's so many good ways of putting it, and that's one of them. I think I would say I help women deprogram their brains from the way the society has taught them to think. And sometimes I call it like I teach women to liberate themselves from the inside out.
Okay.
But truthfully, people of all genders have been programmed by society in certain ways. And when we talk about like living in a sexist society, it's not good for men or people of other genders either, right? I mean, we get socialized to believe that men like don't have and shouldn't have emotions and can't be vulnerable and can't ask for help. And like that socialization messes men up too. So, the irony, a lot of the irony of like what people think about feminism is that they think that like feminists hate men and don't care about men. And actually, no, we just think that everybody should be allowed to be who they are.
Yes.
So if you want to be a like really assertive, woman who's serving in the military, awesome. And if you want to be a man who wants to be softer and stay home with your kids and let your partner make the money, also awesome. It's just freedom for everybody.
Okay, so along those lines, and you've kind of alluded to it a little bit, but can you talk to my listeners about your work and how you help women achieve their dream life on their terms? The on their terms is my most favorite. I say that a lot as well. That part to me is really important. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, 100%. We had this actually great experience with myself and my leadership team where we were revisiting like our mission and how we talk about our work. And I won't curse, but you'll get the bleep. We decided that really, because we've done all these different versions of like, we, help women liberate their minds so they can do what? Like live their dream life, reach their potential, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually we were like, no, it's so they can do whatever the F they want.
Amen.
Like,
Yes.
it's not, maybe you don't want to fulfill your potential. That's okay. It's not my business. So what I really help people socialize as women do, although of course, like many men listen to my podcast also, is identify the way that society has taught them how to think about themselves. So if I can do like a 90-second primer about like how the brain and society work, when you're born, you don't know anything pretty much, right? You have instincts like to nurse or to cry if you're upset, but you don't have like opinions about gender roles, right? You don't know anything. That's my belief. There are people who think these things are, divinely ordained and in your brain from birth, but that's not what I believe. So as you're growing up, you're learning literally everything from the world around you. And that's all part of socialization. Like the fact that we know we're supposed to wear clothes when we go outside, or that we shouldn't like pee in the living room floor. That's socialization. It's like society teaching you, what does it mean to be in the society? How are you supposed to behave? But we're also getting taught a lot of things like, who are you supposed to be? What are people like you like? What are people like you good at? What are people like you bad at? What are people like you allowed to do? What are people going to value about people like you? And sometimes it's explicit. In my grandmother's generation, people would have just very explicitly said to her, even in school, like, well, you're going to raise kids, and that's, you get education so that you can teach your kids well at home after you quit your job after 2 years when you get married. I didn't hear that explicitly in my generation, right? But for me, some people in some communities still do. But I might have picked up on other things like, if let's say I had an uncle who was very successful professionally and wasn't married, and nobody really seemed to think that was a big deal. But if I had an aunt who was very successful professionally but never married, people were always talking about like how sad it was that, Aunt Jackie just hasn't met anyone yet. So we like get all of this stuff explicitly or implicitly, and it shapes the way that we think about ourselves in the world.
Absolutely. Okay, so along those same lines, when you talk about women achieving a dream life and true happiness, and I love that you said whatever that means for you, it's on your terms, but along the same lines of what you just said, a lot of mass media will kind of subliminally tell us to follow this linear path. It's been happening forever, right? So can you talk about like the daily pressures that women face from society, whether we realize it or not? And then how can we tune it out and just kind of do our own thing? Because that is very difficult for a lot of women.
Totally. Yeah, I think women are socialized to sort of follow whatever's laid out for them and then wait for that to be like recognized or rewarded.
Yes.
Right. So women are socialized to like be a good girl in the household, be a good student, be a good employee. You're just supposed to sort of follow what's laid out, and then you don't sort of go after things. You like wait for someone to approve of what you've done. I do think this is changing, hopefully somewhat with like younger generations, but women also receive this socialization still. We have come a long way, but so, let's say now it's not that the only thing you're supposed to do is get married and have children, but it's still sort of like that is a defining thing about you, regardless of what else you do, right? I mean, I always think about like, they'll interview someone who's like the prime minister of a country, and if she's a mother, it's like the cultural thing is she has to say, being a mother is the most important job I'll ever have. And I'm like, is it though? If you're running a whole country, it might be the most like all consuming, or even the one you love them. Like, is it the most important? Not every woman who said that believes it probably. And you very rarely hear like a male senator say being a dad is the most important job I'll ever have. There's nothing wrong, obviously, with being a parent. I'm a step parent myself. I know you are as well. But it's that pressure, right? That's a perfect epitome of like, yes, you can do these other things, have a career or start a business or whatever else, but this is still the most important thing. So when you combine like there's all of that pressure of like you need to be really focused on romantic relationships, getting married, having children, and the conditioning to like be a good girl, follow the path, do what you're supposed to do, make everybody happy. As you say, it can be very hard to kind of go out on your own path. And you can't tell a brain that is fixated on other people's opinions to just tune them out. It doesn't know how to do that.
Right.
And your brain is actually trying to help you because women are socialized to believe that their worth and value comes from what other people think of them, right? It's like you're constantly like geolocating or like echolocating like a bat based on like what you think everybody else thinks about you at all times, including people like who are dead or you haven't seen them since third grade, but you're lying in bed at night thinking about it, right? That's because women are taught that's sort of like that they're like the stock market, like their value goes up and down based on what people think about them at any given time. And so from that perspective, you can understand, like, of course your brain is worried about this, but the way that you can start to change it is not so much by learning to, like, you can't just ignore it. You have to change your thoughts so that you create your own sense of value and worth that you are tethered to internally, right? Because that is when you can stop. You don't even have to tune it out. It just stops mattering to you what other people are saying and what they think.
So you're saying that, and this is, I know you talk a lot about this in your book, that I totally can relate to the validation, wanting the validation, hearing it. It started with me, not to get too personal, but with a dad that didn't give a lot of it. So I craved it. And now as an adult, I've done a lot of therapy, realizing I'm looking for it everywhere else. And so definitely this comes up for me and speaks very true. But you're saying you're teaching women how to reprogram their mind so that they are giving themselves their own validation. And you literally could teach me to stop worrying about everybody else or all different things validating me.
Yes, I can teach you how to start thinking in a way that does that for you. I do think that, like, some of the language we use, like, one of the reasons that people have a hard time changing their thinking is that it's natural to believe, oh, I need to stop thinking this thought.
Yeah,
Like, your brain doesn't know how to stop thinking a thought,
completely. Thank you. Amen.
right? Like, even to know if you're thinking the thought, you have to think the thought and then go look and see if you're thinking it. So you can't just stop, right? And if you think about the way the brain works, you literally have neural networks, like little neurons that are connected to each other, right? And if you've thought a thought a lot, for instance, I'm not good enough, people are going to find out I'm a fraud, nobody's going to want to marry me because I'm too fat. I say that as a fat woman. Like, whatever it is, whatever self-critical thoughts you have had, like, on repeat in your brain 6,000 times a day for 30, 40, 50 years, that's like having a very strong muscle memory. It's not just going to disappear. You can't just, like, turn off the light in that room and never go in there again. So you have to start building a new neural network, right? It's just like if you went to physical therapy and you had been, like, walking weird for 40 years because you had an injury that was never taken care of. Yeah, intellectually I can tell you, okay, you need to put the weight on your other foot, but your body doesn't know how to do that yet. So you have to practice. So that is what I teach in the book. This book is very like, concrete and actionable. I read so many self-help books in the day. Like, I may have been one of the number one self-help reader on the Eastern Seaboard. So many of them were like 10 pages of actual content or idea, right? Like, then like 210 pages of filler. And I had no idea how to implement any of it. So my book is it's not dense. I think it's an easy read. I hope so. But it's very concrete and actionable. In every chapter, there's exercises to teach you how to start rewiring your brain.
I love that. I love that it is very action forward. Okay, so while you were talking about this, I was thinking about some of my female friends and myself. And one of the biggest things I see, actually, as you know, and you said this, I'm a stepmom. So I've never had a child of my own. So I don't know, Kara, if this is true or not, but for me, it's true in the sense of I don't think I'm all about helping everybody else. I see that most in my mom friends. They are needing to put everything and everyone else before themselves. I don't always, sometimes I think I'm a little selfish because I don't always feel that way. Do you think that that feeling comes a lot when you become a mom? Or do you think that just is women in general? We feel like we need to put everyone and everything before us.
I feel like it's yes and. It's like both. Like, I do think women are socialized that way. And even the way you're talking about it, you're like, well, I don't literally always put everyone else in the world before me, so maybe I'm selfish.
Oh my gosh, I didn't even catch that. You're so right. Yeah, I feel selfish sometimes. Oh my gosh, you just like gave me this like big moment because I was like, if I'm not putting everyone else first, then I am selfish. So I literally just fed into your whole point.
There you go. Transformation in the moment. I deliver. Yeah, so that's how deep it is, right? That's our definition. A woman's definition of selfish is, have I ever once in my life put my own desires or needs above anybody else, including people I barely know? So that's baseline. And then, yes, I think when you have a child, there's so much socialization around being a mother. And I've definitely, had coached people and seen them, also my friends, that some of our programming can kind of like wake up when we're in that situation. I've had that even as a stepmother. Like, I have had like Oh, I didn't, because I had chosen not to have children originally on purpose. So I hadn't really done a bunch of work on any of these thoughts because it was like, well, I'm never going to need to deal with those. And then all of a sudden, even being a step parent, and this is my partner, it's not one of the situations where like a divorced dad, doesn't know how or want to parent, so they marry a woman to do, like, my partner is the primary parent. I am like the stereotypical, probably dad in the situation. Like, so it's not even like I'm fully immersed in that role in any way. And yet I like see it waking up, sort of like if there's anything you could be doing for the kid and you're doing something for yourself, that's bad. That's selfish. So I do think women are socialized with an extra layer of the selfless mother, like that you are supposed to care only about your children, that you are supposed to put your children first before anything else. And there's a long history of women being essentially kind of blamed for anything that goes wrong with their children. It will vary widely. It's like 1 minute children have problems because mothers are too frigid. The next minute it's because the mothers are too warm and too fuzzy. It's like not, it doesn't make any sense. It's like not rational. So I do think it's both. I mean, I think there's just another layer of programming that like wakes up in our brains.
How about, because a lot of women are listening right now that are running businesses or stepping into entrepreneurship. So what are some examples of, in the professional sense, of women feeling the need to put everything and everyone else forward? What does that look like?
I think actually these things do apply in both scenarios, whether you work for someone or you're an entrepreneur. But of course, I often I coach people who are employees of other people, of course, but then also as a coach, I end up with coaches who I'm coaching, who are also entrepreneurs. So I do both. In terms of putting other people first, what I think shows up is things like answering every email as soon as it comes in at the expense of doing your substantive work. Helping, right? Always jumping in to help out and solve some problem for somebody else, like maybe for your boss, maybe for your direct report, maybe for your colleague. Spending a lot of time like worrying about how you're perceived, assuming that people think poorly of you, rereading the email draft 10,000 times before you send it out. And then after you send it out, rereading it again and worrying about it, right? Assuming that if your boss wants to talk to you, it's because you got in trouble, you did something wrong. And then women also end up taking on a lot of sort of administrative labor, right? A kind of uncompensated additional labor, like serving on all the committees, planning all of the firm events, doing all the whatever. So I see that and that, that part. But even if you're an entrepreneur, that can be like over accommodating clients, not having boundaries, being up in your email and your Slack all the time for those quick hits of dopamine and not focusing on what you need to be doing. The thing that I actually think is the most insidious that I see in entrepreneurs when I'm coaching is the second guessing of themselves and the belief that they are like financially irresponsible no matter what it is that they're doing. And even if they're making money, like the way that women are socialized to think about money and decision making, and the way that women are socialized to not see themselves as authority, right? As authorities. It's always like someone else is the authority, usually a man, especially if it's about money. And I need that person to tell me what to do. And whatever I did is wrong.
Okay, tell me more. I want to dive in a little bit deeper about the money thing. How are women socialized around money, especially women in business?
Yeah. So in the book, in the chapter on money, I talk about the 3 money lies that women are taught. And one of them is that money is for men. So women are socialized to basically believe that money is for men. And if you think about this historically, it makes sense because it was only very recently historically that women could even have their own money, right? So it was not until 1974, we just had the 50th anniversary of this, that women could, in all 50 states, open a credit card without a male having to sign to guarantee it. Like, that means there's people listening to this podcast who, if they had, you could have a multi-million-dollar business. And like, there were some states where you were not legally, like a bank did not have to let you open your own credit card. It's not that long ago culturally. Like, things have not.
You said like 50 years ago or whatever. I'm like, what?
Yeah, my partner was alive. My mother was alive. My mother was old enough to have a business. And that's, so historically, in the West especially, like, women did not have independent economic rights. You couldn't have a bank account. You couldn't own your own money. You couldn't make your own contracts. And so the way that women who, tended to interact with money was in a like household way. Like, somebody will get, your husband usually gives you the amount of money that like you have for the household, and then you're responsible for that. And so we see that now where that's still sort of the model that we have when we talk about what it means to be good with money for women, right? What it means to be, when you ask a woman what it means to be good with money, it is always about like budgeting and saving and being thrifty. It's like
That
that's
was the first thought that just came to my mind.
yeah. And you're a multi-million-dollar entrepreneur. Like
I really need your book. You're triggering me left and right, and I did not expect that from this episode.
Amy was like, I got this. And now she's like, oh my God, society got to me too.
Oh my God, is right.
So men are socialized to believe that men are socialized around money to think about investing, making money, taking calculated risks. There's studies of the media of like articles that are written for women and men. And the articles for women are like budgeting, how to cut out your avocado toast, how to, right? And I think that's also, I mean, this is a whole other conversation, but I just think it's useful to note, like, it's a lot like food, right? Women are just constantly being socialized to like be smaller, restrict yourself, whatever your appetites or desires are wrong and bad, and you shouldn't have them, and you need to like get smaller, smaller, smaller. And men are socialized to like take up space. So when women then try to become entrepreneurs, all of their thoughts about money are like, I'm not in charge of how much money I make. Money is not for people like me. I'm irresponsible with money. I shouldn't spend money, right? I mean, the number of entrepreneurs that I have coached about business debt where I'm like, okay, let's talk about the invention of capitalism and why we have it. It's because businesses often need capital to expand. That's literally why we invented the market economy. But women are socialized to think about money as a personal, like checkbook, pocketbook issue, right? And so they take like the consumer debt mindset and they apply it to their business, because being good with money would mean never having any debt and being thrifty.
So I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but when I got out of my partnership with this guy that it just wasn't working out anymore, it was like the worst experience of my life to get out of it because we had to figure out the money situation. But I remember the day I called him and said, I want out of this partnership. And he said, this is not going to be good. And I said, why do you say that? And he said, because how you are with money. And I never asked him what he meant. And I always hated him for that statement. But I just had this realization that I've gotten way better over 15 years. But back then I was even worse about holding it tight. You're right. No debt, being responsible. I'm a good girl with money. And so I think he was implying a lot of, if he was seen as investing, taking risk, being bold with it, I was the one who was holding it tight and was scared to spend it or be irresponsible with it.
Yeah.
So he could have actually been saying something that there's a little truth behind it. I just was so mad at the comment.
I love the point of this episode is like, the man was right.
The man was right. I don't know how we just got there. Let's move away from this actually. But it was a realization that, yeah, I have held it very tight for a while now. I think definitely I've been bolder over the years. And to be honest, it's easier to be bolder when you have a lot of it.
Totally. Yes. But I think that socialization builds on itself, right? Because it's also harder to, you can make, I mean, my grandmother ran a furniture business and she was somebody who was extremely frugal, and she did build wealth through being like extremely, extremely frugal. You can do it that way. But, this is just like the feminism conversation. It's like, I want all women and men to be free to choose if they want to be big and bold or be thrifty. Like, it's not that one is better than the other. But when we have such a gender split where like all women think that it's about being thrifty. I mean, I had a big moment in my entrepreneurship development. And for your listeners who don't know me, like I run a multi-7-figure coaching business myself. And I came from the nonprofit world. So I like really had to make a big mental jump from like, to do what you love and help people, you have to make a pittance and somebody else decides it for you, to like, I'm going to create a business and have employees and, build wealth. And I still totally remember, this is another funny story because it turns out to be about a man, but it's because they're socialized to think better about money. So I had like my first bookkeeper. I had like so much shame that I had like, I don't know, $10,000 in business credit card debt. I'd be like an amount that now would be in my business would be nothing, but it then felt like a really big deal. But I had like a lot of shame about that. And that meant that my business wasn't working. So I had this whole mental story about that, which was of course keeping me small in business. Right. And I totally remember that this guy was like, yeah, that's fine. This is like normal in a business. We're just going to pay it off over time. You have enough money coming in. Like, this all makes sense. This is a working business. And like, I'm glad that happened. And I'm like, why the F did I need a street white dude to tell me that my business was a working business?
Totally. Like, I could have figured that out myself. So
But I couldn't because of my socialization. Like, so that's why I wrote the books so that you guys don't have to go find a dude to tell you that your business is working.
thank you, my friend. Okay, so I know this next question I'm going to ask you is in the book, but I'm dying to know if you could give us a little. How do you reprogram your brain to stop doing this, to stop operating that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is just awareness. Like, as you've experienced on this call, we don't even know what we're thinking, even if we've gotten a lot of coaching and a lot of therapy. I mean, I work with women all the time who have been to therapy, have worked with other coaches. And I think I am a good coach, but it's really more that if you are not taking into account and like educating people on the socialization piece, they're not even aware that those thoughts are there. You literally don't even see them. So the book teaches you, number one, like how to become aware of those thoughts. Then when it comes to changing the thoughts, I really specialize in like very small steps to actually building new beliefs, because I came to this work into coaching and I was not like a woo-woo seeker person. I went to Harvard Law School. I am extremely like logical. I'm not always efficient, but like I want to know something's true. I'm going to build an argument. That's how I'm going to change my mind. And so when I discovered kind of coaching and changing thought work generally, it's like there was a lot of like affirmations or like positive thinking or just like pick a better thought and believe that. And I was like, if I knew how to do that, I'd already be doing it.
Right.
So that's not helping me. And there's actually studies showing that if you try, affirmations sometimes backfire and make you feel worse, because if they're too far from what you believe, you just feel very conscious of the gap and you feel kind of hopeless. So I have this tool called the Thought Ladder that I teach on my podcast as well. It's in the book, and it teaches you how to brainstorm what I call I can't curse on this podcast. So a 10% less bad thought, let's say.
Okay.
10% less bad thought, because people want, we're like Americans and we're sold the overnight quick fix, and we want it to be like, you take one magic pill and then all your thoughts are changed. And that's not how the brain works. So people, when they're trying to come up with a new thought, what they'll do is pick something they wish they believed. So like if you feel immense shame about your business credit card debt and you think you're bad and irresponsible with money, it's like people are like, well, what I want to believe is that I'm an incredible entrepreneur. And then they're like, but I have so much evidence to the contrary. And then they're like arguing with their brain. Nothing useful is happening. So when we go for a 10% less bad thought, we're just trying to basically feel 10% better. We're not trying to feel amazing, and we're not trying to believe something amazing. So you might instead be practicing something like, lots of successful entrepreneurs had credit card debt at one point. Or it's possible that a person can be good at making money in business and have some business credit card debt. Or, right, we could go on and on with different examples. That's really the point, is like you have to come up with a tiny percent less bad thought, a tiny percent better thought. And that way you'll be able to build on that. Once you believe that, then you go to the next one. You can work your way up the ladder to truly believing things that would blow your mind. I mean, I made in my first law job in New York, I made $45,000 a year. And in Manhattan, that's not much. That's barely living. And now I run a multi-seven-figure business, right? So I have done this work. You can go a long way taking a little step at a time.
I'm all about the baby steps. So I love that you shared that, because that is something that's very actionable. And I know that it works. So, and I love that you didn't have me jump all the way to like, I'm a badass woman with money and money flows easily to me. If I was in debt, that would be very hard for me to get to like that. So I can get behind that 100%. So tell me this, for women that are in business, or just women chasing their dreams, all this conditioning, I guess I could probably make some guesses here, but I want to hear from you. How does this conditioning have us suffer in terms of building our businesses or chasing our dreams? And also, in addition to that, the stress and anxiety, I'm sure it amplifies it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the different ways, it's sort of like the answer to that is like some of all the ways we've discussed, right? It's like if you're trying to build a business and you feel guilty anytime you're doing anything that's not like taking care of your kid, and you think that you're irresponsible and that you aren't good with money, and you think that you're supposed to help everybody for free, so you shouldn't charge, or you should undercharge. That's a big one for women entrepreneurs, right? Feeling guilty that you're doing something that helps people and that it costs money, even though like doctors charge people all the time. I mean, most all helping professions, like therapists, are usually not free. And I mean, the thing I love about this makes me particularly nuts when I deal with it with coaches, because The thing I love about being a coach is like you can have a whole podcast that's totally free for people who can't afford to work with you. And then you can charge people who want to work with you and want that attention. Like doctors aren't giving you free medical advice on the internet, but somehow it's okay for them to charge, right? So like that kind of helping profession thing is a real socialization humdinger. And I think just the second guessing yourself in general, like there's being an entrepreneur requires like so many decisions and so many of them are going to be wrong. Like this is the thing that I feel like people from the outside don't see. I won't speak for you, but I will say for me, as somebody who has what is considered a very successful coaching business, most of my decisions have been wrong. Like probably 90% of them. Like from the outside, people think like, oh, if she has this result, like she must be making all the right decisions and I'm making all the wrong ones. Like, no, ma'am, I am making a lot of wrong decisions too. I am just getting up and making another decision and making another decision and making another decision. But that was only possible because I did so much thought change work around not beating myself up if I failed, like trying to fail, how I thought about decisions. Women get so paralyzed making decisions. I mean, literally from like what to have for lunch. And that's not because we're weak brained. It's because literally we've been socialized from the time we were born. And think about any women's magazine. You're basically being told that you literally don't know how to do anything. Like you don't know how to dress yourself. You don't know how to treat your skin. You don't know what colors you should wear. You don't know how to have a morning routine. You don't know what to eat. You don't know how to parent. There's billions and billions of dollars in industry convincing us that we like don't know how to do anything. So it's normal, but you have to change it if you want to be able to kind of trust yourself. And the relationship with yourself is the core of all of this stuff. Like what keeps you from beating yourself up if a decision doesn't work? What makes you able to make a decision and not get paralyzed? Like what makes you able to deal with the juggling or the balancing or whatever you want to call it of like even if you don't have kids, just like your partner, your friends, you're building a business, as you and I know, a big project. It can be very intensive and like you're going to have to make those trade-offs. So all the suffering and all of that is not actually the doing of it. It's the story that we're constantly doing it wrong and not good enough and disappointing everybody and not worthy of love. And changing that story makes all the rest of that easier.
Right there. That's the little soundbite I'm going to have to grab for social media because that is big and valuable. And I really hope people heard that. That made me think about this whole idea of reprogramming our brains and the stress that comes along with the societal norms that we are just 100% don't even know. Like, I think that's the biggest thing that people are going to get this from this book, at least for me, of all these things I didn't even think. I'm like, you're talking about other women, not really me. I have a successful career. I'm a feminist, but whoa, I'm kind of a little bit shook here. So I'm a little bit scared to dive in deeper, but I'm going to. But I want you to explain, if you would, how you teach women. This is a little twist or a little next topic, how you teach women to alter their perspective on time management. This one was big to me. You have this ability to help us feel more present in our lives while also being more productive, reducing stress. Like, what is that about?
Yeah. I mean, all of the kind of thought patterns we've been describing, especially the like second guessing and not trusting yourself, are huge time drains. Like if you think about how much time you spend crowdsourcing everybody's opinion about what you should do. And then, like, I mean, I do that. Listen, also, I don't hold myself out as like, I've solved all of this forever, right? I go into my mastermind Slack and I write out a whole thing. And at the end, I'm like, why am I sending this? Like, I know the answers. The answer is going to be, what do you want to do about it? And then I'm going to have to decide. Like, we've all done that where we like crowdsource a bunch of answers. We still don't feel satisfied. So maybe we like crowdsource again or crowdsource with some different people, or we put it off and then we do the whole thing over again. All of that is because women are socialized to be perfectionists. I actually just had a therapist on my podcast who told me that girls are more often actually, like the studies show, girls are more often actually praised for being perfect. So like boys are more often allowed to sort of like make mistakes before adults will swoop in to rescue them. Or like they're allowed to be messy. They're allowed to be rambunctious, right? And girls are actually both sort of rescued earlier if they're having trouble, so they're not allowed to sort it out themselves, and are more often praised with like words like, oh, that's so perfect. So we grow up perfectionists, right? And we're trying to control everything to feel okay about ourselves. I mean, the biggest cost, I think, to time management for women is that perfectionism, because it's almost like a way of, we don't want to reckon with the fact that our time is actually limited and that we have to make hard choices about what is really worth it to us and what we're willing to sacrifice. No matter how productive you get, you still, you can't like climb out Kilimanjaro while also singing in the opera. Like, you have to pick, you have to make some decisions. But women are so socialized to doubt our own decisions, to think we have to do everything perfectly in order to be like allowed to live, and to waste so much time, I think, in like self-recrimination and trying to get things perfect, that we end up spending so much of our time on things that like don't matter to us, or that, it would take an hour to do it at an A minus, and then we spend 13 hours trying to do it at an A plus.
Yep.
And we undercut ourselves. I mean, I started out coaching lawyers because I used to be a lawyer, and women lawyers were struggling to meet their billable hours, not because they're not as smart or educated, because they would underbill. They would say to themselves like, oh, that shouldn't have taken me 3 hours, so I'm going to bill it for 2. And like the dudes down the hall were not doing that. They were like, I thought about this case in the shower. That's an hour. And there's only 24 hours in a day, and law firm associates have to bill a lot of hours. So you can't really go around reducing your hours by 1/3 and still meet what you need to meet. Like, it seeps in everywhere. And the last thing I'll say is like, I talk in the book about how we fill our calendars with shoulds, like all the things we think we're supposed to do or we should do. That's like another drain. So with all of that, it's not surprising that we feel overwhelmed.
Okay, I have a question for you. So the female lawyer who's not billing because she's like, that took me 3 hours, it should have taken me 1, I'm going to bill for 1. And then the guy in the shower is like, I just came up with an idea, I'm billing you for 2 hours, even though the shower is 20 minutes. How do we become like, I don't want to say like men.
Yeah, we want to meet in the middle. I don't think you should overbill your clients either.
No. And not all men would be dishonest like that. We're not man bashing here, but you get it. So how do I get more toward to me, I want to be bolder and more powerful in that.
Well, I think most women have the assumption, like subconsciously, that they're probably doing it wrong. Whatever it is, we think we're doing it wrong or not well enough. So I think part of it comes from starting to notice how often that's happening and starting to reprogram that thought pattern, which to me is less about being like, oh, I'm doing it right, and more about stepping out of that paradigm altogether, right? It's not like, what does it mean to be doing it right or wrong? Your own brain's making that up. Your brain is basically constantly running like a vaudeville show with a ventriloquist, where your brain is like, you're doing it wrong, I know it's right. And then your brain is just completely making it up. And it moves the goalpost, right? You change what you're doing, then your brain's like, no, that's wrong too. I don't know what's right, but that's wrong. So I think that it really has to be like, not trying to, this is sort of like another version of like when positive thinking doesn't work, not trying to convince ourselves to believe I'm doing it right all the time. It's like getting out of that mindset altogether and figuring out a different way to navigate our decisions. And I think that most women are trying to navigate by, what's the right answer? What will make other people happy or think well of me? What am I supposed to do? And one of the things I work on quite a lot when people work with me in the Feminist Self-Help Society, which is my coaching membership, is like, what are your values? Who is it you're trying to be? What is it you want to be doing with your life? Like, those are values you can make decisions by. And the truth is, there are trade-offs. I mean, we haven't even really gotten into this, but we live in a real world full of structural inequities. We live in a world where like there isn't mandated maternity leave, and there is childcare is extremely unaffordable for a lot of people. And, so your time management is not only impacted by your thoughts, it's impacted by the structural realities also. But if we want to change the world, we're going to have to believe that like our ideas are worthwhile. We are worth speaking up. We're allowed to try and fail and make mistakes and try again. Like, all those things are necessary for actually changing some of those structural problems too.
Okay, I think you just answered my next question, but I just want to make sure. So when we're talking to women running successful businesses, and this whole idea of we're looking for external validation everywhere we turn. So if we were able to let that go, what would you say like the steps that women need to take to run their businesses knowing that they deserve to be exactly where they are?
Yeah. I would say that what I would want women to think about is less, it's sort of like stopping thinking a thought It would be less, because women are often coming for coaching and saying exactly that. Like, I just need to let it go. And I'm like, your brain does not know how to let it go. Your brain thinks that like survival depends on this customer who's mad at you changing her mind. Right. So it's like less about letting it go. And it's more about, how do I literally, like very concretely, what thought do I need to practice to feel that perhaps even if someone's unhappy with me, or even if I make a mistake, I am not now a worthless piece of garbage. Right? Like maybe that is where we need to start. Like, just because someone's upset or just because I made a mistake does not mean that I am worthless and not worthy of love. Like, sometimes we have to start at the real basics. So I think it's about rewiring, like starting to think a different way.
Yeah.
And then I think it's about like for me, a lot of the entrepreneurship struggle people have is around people pleasing, in the sense of, because women are socialized to believe that everyone else's opinion is what determines our worth, we get stuck in this bind, which I 100% was in myself, where I was like, okay, so what I want to do is abandon this highly educated career that I've spent 10 years on.
Wild.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to like, I went to Yale, I went to Harvard Law School, I clerked, like I did this whole career. Now I was like, okay, so I'm going to quit that to become a life coach on the internet. But I want everybody to approve of this decision.
Oof.
Right. And like at the time, I didn't have enough awareness to see that that was bananas. Why would anybody approve of that decision? Like, that seemed like a terrible decision. I had no background in running a business. What the hell is a life coach? What the heck is a life coach is what most of the people I had known until that point would have said. Like, so I see this so much in women that I coach, not just entrepreneurs. We want to do things differently. We want to like go out on a limb in whatever way that is. It's like not always huge. It might just be like, I want to parent differently than I was parented, or I want to start a business, obviously, for a lot of your listeners, or like maybe I want to try experimenting with non-monogamy with my partner. I just want to like mix it up. So I want to do something different than what society tells me, but I need society to agree with me that it's a good idea and validate my decision. And I don't want anyone ever to disapprove.
When you say it that way, it seems ridiculous.
Well, I like to laugh at our brains. I think it just makes it easier, right? It's like, well, that's not an option. Like, we can't, that's not how it's going to work. You know, you want to reject society's norms. I am all for that. And this is why it's so important to have your own back, because society's not going to agree. You're basically like, it's like, here's a dish I made you. And you're like, no, thanks. That's gross. And then you want society to be like, you're right. It is gross. You should eat something else. But when you have your own back, it's not so much that you like let it go. It's more just that you're like, I get it, man. Like, I get it, society. It's okay. I totally get now, of course. And my parents are super supportive now, but it's not that they were unsupportive, but I'm just saying, like, I totally get why they were concerned. That makes sense. Giving people permission to not understand, to not agree, is very easy when you really have your own back. If you don't have your own back, it's the hardest thing in the world.
Oof. To have your own back. That's a big theme, I think, for this conversation, but also for your book. And it's important. And I think a lot of women listening very much want to have their own back, but they're not quite there yet. I could totally relate. So it's important work. You know, you said something that I wasn't planning on talking to you about in this interview, but I think a lot of people listening, men and women, would find great value. How the heck did you find the courage, and what did it look like for you to let go of a law career and education to be a life coach? Like, there's people listening right now, Kara, that want to make a pivot. You know, I teach people how to make courses, and they're like, I have been a marketing manager in a corporate job for 20 years, but I want to teach people how to train their dogs because I am so passionate about dog training, but there is no way I can make a pivot like that. How did you figure out how to be so bold?
So I think this actually relates to what was coming up for me as you were just talking about like having your own back. It all, like, that sounds great and people don't know how to do it. I mean, I use this term too, right? So you are the longest relationship you're ever going to have, right? And most of us speak to ourselves in the way we would never speak to anyone else we were in an intimate relationship with. So if you are asking yourself, like, what does it even mean to have your own back or to trust yourself? Like, these things can sound conceptual and then we don't know how to implement them. Literally just listening to the way you talk to yourself and imagining that you are two different people. And if you were trying to maintain a long-term, intimate, loving relationship with that person,
yes,
how would you speak to them? It doesn't mean, it's like self-love gets thrown around a lot too. And it's like, sometimes I think like self-love turns into this like perfectionistic fantasy also, like when I fully love myself, I'll always feel amazing. And like, no, it's just like loving anybody else. You might still sometimes be annoyed with yourself, or sometimes be tired of your own thoughts, or sometimes let yourself down. But like, you have that bedrock. It's like, I'm sometimes irritated with my partner and he's sometimes irritated with me. But we have a baseline of like mutual respect and affection that most women don't have with themselves. And like, that's what allows you to do anything bold, to do anything big. It's not like changing your thoughts to never feel fear. That is not what I'm teaching. And, negative emotion is a part of human life. It's changing your thoughts that your relationship with yourself is that supportive friend who would say to you, like, listen, I know that does sound like a wild decision, but I think you can do it. And like, yeah, you're probably going to fall down, but I'm going to be here to help you back up. And like, we're going to give this a go. And you know what? If it works out, it's going to be amazing. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to be nice to you about it. Like, that's what gives you the courage to take a risk. You don't have to feel, it's like we think we have to feel 100% sure and bold and brave, because the alternative we think is like self-criticism. But you don't have to feel 100% sure. All you have to be sure about is that you're not going to punch yourself in the face when you fall down.
Yes, exactly. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love that. And I could use that. I literally told myself the other day, would you say that, Amy, to a really good friend? What I was telling myself about a challenge I was having. I would never talk to a friend the way I sometimes talk to myself. So, but then also you'd be proud of me. I looked in the mirror today and I was doing a bunch of videos and I was hating how I looked. And I was like, you got this, girl. I love you. You could do this.
Yeah.
So I had both moments.
And we all do. It's progress, not perfection.
Exactly. Progress, not perfection. Tell me about this amazing book that you have written, why the world needs it, why you wrote it. Like, let's talk about it, because I think every single person, I think men and women, can men read this book?
My fiance is reading this book and he's like, I don't know, a lot of this sounds like me. He's like underlining everything. And my father read the book and he was like, I didn't expect to be so that I was going to like see myself in this. So yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. So everyone listening, I want you to get your hands on this book. And I really do think you're going to be triggered like me in the best way possible and realize, whoa, I didn't realize I was as conditioned as I am. And such a gift. That is such a gift to realize, like what you said at the very beginning of the podcast, just being aware of this is the first big step. And that's like the surface of this book. It gets so much deeper, but it does help you be aware. So talk to me about the book, why you wrote it, why it's important.
Well, I mean, that is exactly why I wrote it. And I think, we haven't talked about this as much either yet, but maybe it's a good time to just talk a little bit about it, is that the book is written from what's called an intersectional feminist lens, which means that it's not just talking about gender, it's talking about all the different ways that we're socialized, right? We are socialized based on our race, our ethnicity, our religion, our body size or shape, our typicality or neurodiversity, our community, our, just like all these different identities we have. So to your point about like, can people socialize as men, get something out of the book? The book is written mostly about gender, but in the first exercise in the introduction is you going through and identifying, okay, what are the different identities I have and what messages did I receive about those identities? And then every other tool in the book can be applied, right, based on those identities.
Yeah.
So I really wrote the book because I wanted, it's such a simple question, but really the answer is just like, I think that everyone needs to know this. Like, I feel like, I'm very mission driven. Like, I was a reproductive rights, litigator and academic before I became a life coach. I've been a professional feminist my whole life, one way or another. And so to me, it's like, what is my goal? My goal is that not just every woman, every person in the world, but especially every woman and every marginalized person knows that, the way society has taught them to think about themselves is not the only way to think about themselves. And I really, truly believe that like the big pressing problems we have in the world, they have to be solved by human brains. And anybody who has ever made social change, it's been because, or personal change, but it's been because they looked at what society had told them to think and they were like, I don't think so. Like, I'm not going to believe that. I do think women can vote. I don't think our uteruses are going to wander to our brains and get in the way or whatever else they were doing. Like, right? I mean, that is what changes the world, is people thinking differently than how society taught them. Otherwise, the world would never change and we would just repeat. So to me, like, freeing your mind is the first step to actually making change in the world. And maybe that's in your personal life. Maybe you're breaking your generational trauma by parenting differently, by being the first woman in your family to, make more money than her husband, to whatever it is. Or maybe you want to run for president. Wherever you are in that spectrum, I want you to know that you can be in charge of what you think and that you can actually change your thinking to change anything else in your life. So I wrote the book. That's why I wrote the book.
Okay. Tell everyone the official name and subtitle of this book.
And he's like, do you want people to buy your book? What are you doing? Take Back Your Brain, How a Sexist Society Gets in Your Head and How to Get It Out. You can order it anywhere books are sold. If you go to takebackyourbrainbook.com this week, we're still giving away our pre-order bonuses through the end of this first week. There's like a 30-day guided journal. There's one of my favorite bonuses I've ever created, which is the Encyclopedia of New Thoughts. If you're like new to this and you want some new thoughts to think, it is a monster. It's like all these different areas of life and just lots of thoughts you can borrow. And we're doing a live book club, all sorts of fun stuff.
So tell me that URL again.
Takebackyourbrainbook.com.
Great. Also, I have always said that 80% of being an entrepreneur is literally how you think, your mindset. 20% mechanics. I can teach you webinars, list building, funnels all day. But if you can't get your mind straight, that you will always struggle in entrepreneurship. To me, this is a book to literally help you do just that.
100%. I mean, this book came out of my mindset. I mean, I got on my mindset journey and became an entrepreneur because of it. And I truly think, I think the reason that I have been as successful as I have been is literally just because I practice thoughts a lot. Like even other coaches, I think, are like not always practicing new thoughts. I really think that's a secret to my success. And that's what I teach you how to do in the book.
I got to be in a mastermind day with Kara, and I was struggling with a strategy in my business, and it was around my membership. And I was looking at her like, tell me all the strategies and the funnels and the conversion mechanisms to fix this problem. And she's like, no. And then I don't know if you remember this, but you're like, you basically told me what I was thinking and how that wasn't serving me, and you had me choose a new thought. The whole problem went away. There was no strategy, there was no technique I needed. It was literally a thought I was having in my head about my membership. I changed it. The problem went away. So
that's such a good example too, because your business is bigger than mine, and like you probably know way more strategies than I do. It doesn't matter. When you're in it, you're in it.
Yep. So true. So I have seen the power of this woman, and I cannot wait for you all to get your hands on this important work. So, my friend, thank you for coming on the show. I've been looking forward to this, and I can't wait for everyone to get their hands on your book. Again, takebackyourbrainbook.com. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
So there you have it. I told you in the intro that I felt a little triggered in this interview, and now you know why. There's just a lot of things I would like to unlearn. I feel like personally, I've had a lot of success and I've grown a lot over the 15 years of entrepreneurship. And I have changed my mindset around so many things, including around money, including around my worth, including around speaking up. However, 15 years and multi-million dollars later, I still have a lot to learn. And I think what's powerful about this book is I didn't even realize how deep it goes and how some thoughts I have are just stories I'm telling myself, and they feel so real. Can you relate to that? They feel so very true and so very real, and they are not. And I think this book shines a light on that because imagine if you are able to retrain your brain to be unstoppable, to feel as though you can go after anything because you deserve to go after anything you want. I feel like the sky's the limit. I told Kara at the end of our interview when we ended the recording of the interview portion, I said, you're one of the most intelligent women I know. And I really stand by that. And I really can't wait for you to experience the power of what she shares in this book. So go get it. Takebackyourbrainbook.com. I highly recommend it. And I think it's going to be life-changing for many people that read it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. And I can't wait to see you next week. Same time, same place. Bye for now.